Preparing to stream the meeting live. This meeting is being live streamed. Got it. This is happening.
Hooray.
Let me just get the view of, yeah, there's my background. And I hit play so I can see it. Cool. Now I just need to mute that. Otherwise, because it runs 25 seconds behind, I think. And
Oh,
so
that's why when you're looking at comments, there's a delay.
no, that's just because I'm slow. I don't really use, I only use Zoom if I'm doing an an interview with somebody not in the same room as me. Yeah, I'm just slow. That's what it comes down to. Okay, well, we can start. Just to finish the thought from before we started recording. I mean, if that's your point of view, that's fine. But I don't go in for that level of misogyny myself. So, you know.
They had it coming, Schreier. They had it coming.
I jest. Welcome to the Toronto Beer Podcast with me, your host, Chris Schreier. And as you already can tell, I did manage to get my duck in a row. Yeah, Jordan is here with us. Jordan St. John of the Ontario Craft Beer Guide. I almost said Canada. That would be quite a tome.
I have considered that periodically, and better judgment has waylaid me on the way to the publisher's office.
That is good judgment.
I mean, I think in order to do that, you'd need somebody in every province who had the level of experience that I do.
Yeah. So
you'd need like Joe Weeby from British Columbia, and he's got stuff to do. You know, he's a giant of a man. You can't tell him what to do anyway.
Let me think for a second. Oh, yeah. This is going to end up going on the real podcast feed let me try that again. So for the sake of the podcast, can I introduce you to my friend, Rob Currie? This is Link Ray Gun. It is our theme. Jordan just learned that, of course, we don't actually get to hear the song until the podcast goes live. I'm not that technologically advanced, but we are here. That was the Currie Brothers. Link is in the description. And we are joined by Jordan. Jordan, we discussed many options for what to have for beer. I actually did find that they have the guava sour. Is that does that sound like something Side Launch makes?
That's one of them. Yeah, there's a hibiscus one and a passion fruit one, and there's
it might have been passion fruit. Yeah. Anyway, available at my local LCBO, but that is not what we opted for. Instead, we went for the Silver Bullet. I think that wasn't their branding, was it? Isn't Coors Light a Silver Bullet?
Yeah, Coors Light's the Silver Bullet. I think these guys do one thing really, really well.
Oh, okay. That sounds believable. This is, if you're listening to the podcast, Pabst Blue Ribbon. I don't know what fair they entered the beer contest at, but whichever one it was, they won the blue ribbon.
I think it's like the 1890s. I don't think anybody's updated it since then.
Yeah. You know, it's fair to rest on your laurels. I'm fine with that. You know, I've never even really spent that much time looking at the can. There's a lot of words on it.
Well, here's the thing, and you got to remember this. The last time this was on Vogue was because of exactly the same reason that it's on Vogue at the moment. Like, it was a economic turn down 2006 to 2009 situation. And this Ossington hipster beer. It was the cheapest thing you could buy.
Right.
When we were getting into the thing, we would not have appreciated Pabst Blue Ribbon.
No, sir.
We would have been talking about, I don't know, Church Key, Holy Smoke, or some other thing that had come through Barvolo.
I can literally remember going to like Ronnie's Local in Kensington, and the room was divided sort of 80-20, 20 being folks like us with, I was going to say with beards. The entire place had beards, but drinking little tulip glasses of some sort of quadruple IPA that, you know, you could probably stand a straw in. But the 80 part of the bar were also bearded hipsters, but just slugging PBR. And I remember at the time feeling very high and mighty about it, because I thought, well, that's just ridiculous. What are these fellas doing? But for me, the love affair with PBR now, I mean, hey, the price, you're right, you can't beat it. But with age and maturity, I can not only accept but enjoy a North American lager. There's nothing wrong with it if it's done well. And PBR does it fine. There's nothing wrong with what they're putting in the can. It's not an SA beer, you know, but I drink this after almost every rugby practice because, again, as you say, it's cheap. So it's what the guys show up with. The way that I know, we should open these, by the way, that this is a beer that I paid money for this, my own money, is there's been more than one occasion when somebody has brought a flat of PBR and somebody else has brought a flat of something else. And the one time I remember very specifically, it was Laker, which I didn't even know they still made.
Yeah.
And yeah. And so I had a PBR, you know, we're standing around the bleachers after training. Everyone's hot and sweaty and muddy. And, oh, that beer goes down real smooth. That's nice. Oh, I like that. And then I'd finished it, throwing my can on the ground, saying, yo, Schreier, and threw me a can out of the cooler. And that one was a Laker. And of course, I'm not going to be like, no, give me a PBR. You just take the beer you're handed. So I took it and I opened it and I took a sip and I went, oh, I don't know if I'm going to be able to finish this. I really want a PBR right now.
Here's the thing, and this is important. Like that value brand range has probably the widest range of quality in brewing.
Yeah.
There's some really terrible stuff down at that end of the spectrum. And like, you know, if you can find something like PBR or old style Pilsner that's relatively well made, not such a bad idea. I always thought, you know, when I was writing for The Sun back like a decade ago, I did a thing called Discount Beer February, where I tasted through everything that existed in the value range at the beer store.
Yep.
I figured, you know, there must be a best one. We should do a public service for the readers of the right-wing newspaper who don't actually like craft beer.
Yep.
You know, you got to know your audience. This was before everything went crazy. I didn't really align with them politically, as I think everybody understands. The PBR thing, though, it was just like one of the top three options, along with Trailhead from Wellington.
Yeah, I remember that too. Okay, I just admitted somebody. I've pinned our video, so they shouldn't show up. It doesn't look like they have their video on anyway, so that's fine. But heads up, there's somebody else in the room right now. We'll say it's AS. I normally actually intentionally out people, but I don't know who this is, so I don't want to dox them. Anyway, hey, welcome aboard, AS. AS, if you have a question, put it in the chat. We're not turning on microphones today. I better open the chat window, though. Yeah, I mean, my thing, I guess, what it came down to is I realized, obviously, that I enjoyed, like, I've always liked the steam whistle. I've always had a soft spot for, especially out of the glass bottle. Oh, that just the sound of the carrying the six pack and they're clinking together. It's like angels singing. And then, all of a sudden, Bim's making really crazy, high quality lagers. Started drinking more lagers regularly. Started drinking this at rugby, and it's like most of the beer I drink these days are either incredibly beer geeky, high end crispy boy lagers, or totally macro produced and yet delicious and well made crispy boy lagers. Like, I've got some juicing in my fridge, but other than that, it's just PBR.
It's really hard. I mean, the thing about PBR is that it's not particularly interesting.
No.
But it continues to exist. I mean, this is really important. Like, I'm working on a project for the Ontario Craft Brewers where I'm doing a little historical data entry stuff for them. And in this case, I'm going through like 2018 to the current day, updating their timeline.
Okay.
I have to go through Canadian beer news day by day for 5 years. I'm up to 2021. It's not the nicest job in the world, but it's not outside and I'm not digging a ditch. So that's good. But like 2019, I think Sawdust City did a beer every week.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of those will never come back, even if people liked them. You know, maybe 3 years from now, you'll get another version of Flapdoodle or something. And it's just like, all right. But you're not really playing to the audience at that point. The audience just wants, something predictable if they're going to drink a bunch of something.
Yeah, I think as well, I don't know. There's this whole, the whole post-craft thing. People talk about, like, are we post-craft? Does it even have any value anymore? Does the statement mean anything? Whatever. But I think without actually, I mean, we can engage in that debate, but without engaging in that debate for the moment, the thing is, craft beer or whatever you want to call it, small beer or whatever, it now has such market presence, and it's consumed by so many people. I mean, I know that by sales, it's still like, are they still under 10% or something? Like, it's still quite low, right?
I want to
But
say in Ontario, it might be close to 15. We don't,
okay.
no actual data on it. The only people who know that are the CRA.
And they don't share.
Well, I think you can actually ask them to share, but the process for doing so is to contact them by written mail at their Mississauga address. So it's I've never bothered.
Yeah.
Nobody else has, as far as I know, either. What I will say about it, though, is that most of the numbers that you see are based on LCBO sales data. And
right.
You know, depending on who owns who at what point in time, that changes considerably. So I'd put it close to 15.
Yeah, right. But my point is more than just that so many people now are consuming it, not because they're going out of their way to support a small local brewer, but just because it's become somewhat ubiquitous. Like, it's like you go to the grocery store, you know, oh, look, you know, half of the fridge isn't macro lagers, right? Half of the fridge is something else. So you go, oh, I'll pick up that, I'll pick up that. But those people still don't want, you know, a New England style IPA. They want a cold yellow beer. And so it's almost like you can't, I mean, I guess you can operate as a brewery at a certain scale and do like a new interesting beer every week for a year. And, oh, like we're really digging into the history books this week. We're going to make a, you know, I don't know what, like some, you know, 18th century soured porter. And you're like, cool. I mean, as an exercise, what a fascinating beverage to consume, but nobody wants that, you know.
The argument I've seen recently is that craft beer has become like experiential, as opposed, because, you know, if you've trained an entire generation of people to basically go to the LCBO and buy an 8-pack of individual cans, like you're not even buying two of the same thing, then they're never really going to develop a taste for sitting there drinking, you know, 6 of something. And I find that there's like a generational divide that happens somewhere around like 37 years old. Like older cohort millennials, they're used to 6-packs. Everybody younger than that, no.
Yeah,
that's really, you know, what's driving it, I think, demographically.
Well, it's funny too. I don't know if you listened to when Ben and his buddy Chris interviewed Tweety, but he was talking about how they can see and appreciate the decline of Untapped usage among people in the tap room, where it used to be 4 people would come in, order like 4 flights, sit down, and all of them right away, the phone comes out and they're, you know, tap, 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 tap. Like, and he's like, you know, there's still some of that, but that's kind of dropping. It's not so much like chasing a list or whatever. It's like you say, it's like having the experience of drinking it. Like, I don't know. I think the mindset's really changed. I mean, certainly I stopped using Untapped. I don't want to brag, a long time ago, but for the period that I used it, I just remember my fridge is still on. For the period while I used it every single time I drank a beer, and like it framed every time what I was thinking about every time I had a beer. It's like, oh, I gotta put a rating. And because I knew how awful everybody on Untapped was, I felt like this extra pressure to do good, like not to be a terrible Untapped person, which it turns out, by the way, it's impossible.
There's like legitimately Untapped is an incredible resource for one thing, which is in this current situation where there's a new beer every week, is going back and figuring out when that beer was launched, because the first review will be the first day.
Yeah, exactly. That's fair. Yeah. Also for angst, you can read a lot of angst in those reviews.
Yeah. I mean, if there was one thing that the pandemic highlighted for me, it was that brewers should never interact with the general public. And Untapped is a great example of that. Like, you're trying to sell these people this beer. They don't know anything about beer. The capacity that you have to educate them is limited. So you're probably not going to be able to change their minds about anything unless they have a really fantastic experience. So when they put in, well, it's pretty good for a lager, but I don't like lager, 1 star.
Right. Yeah.
Like, you can't get angry at stupid people.
I mean, you can't. It's tiring.
Yeah, and I feel that there was so much fatigue on the part of brewers who were looking at that it's not, first of all, it's not dignified if you're taking yourself seriously as a businessman or a craftsperson or as an artist to listen to the dumbest person who's buying your product. It's like, it's not going to be validating for you. It's not going to be in any way embiggening, to use a cromulent word.
Mm-hmm.
But Untappd. Oh God. The thing is, like, there was a period there where, people going out in a group of 4, they're trying a new thing. That's kind of social activity. It's fine. It's a nice thing to do. But I mean, it does, become very difficult to have that idea of exclusivity when there's so much stuff that you can't possibly keep up with it. So, I mean, if the idea was, I have 5,000 ratings on Untappd, I know more than you do, and there's like that many beers coming out this season, it's not possible anymore. So lose it for that reason.
Yeah. Yeah. Untappd. Not sad. I was going to say, see that gone. I think it still exists. I just never see it. So.
Oh yeah, no, it definitely exists. But if you were a brewery at this point, I mean, you might have at one point retweeted a really good Untappd rating, but you're never going to put it on Instagram because who cares?
Yeah. And Twitter's dead. So, there it is. Hey, speaking of things that are dead, we should pour one out. Haven't discussed this because I don't think the news had broken last Monday, or maybe it just had. And last Monday was terrible. I was so tired. I was dying last Monday. It was awful. We'd had, I don't know if I'd even got into the details of why it was in such bad state, but we do this fundraiser every year called Rugby Volleyball, and it's for the rugby section to raise money. And we play beach volleyball and get like obscenely drunk. And then I had a kids tournament the next morning. So I went from like shocking amounts of, I think I was mostly drinking 3-speed actually, which was quite nice. I like a good 3-speed. Speaking of reliably snappy yellow beers. But to waking up to drive to Aurora to coach rugby for 3 hours in the sun, and got home on Saturday, went to the beach with some friends and just sat around and kept drinking. So when I woke up on Monday, I was just ruined. It was so bad. And so the podcast was garbage. But anyway, whether or not Anchor had died at that point, the news, of course, did break. We're going to lose Anchor Brewing ostensibly, but I have a theory, which is that somebody's going to swoop in and buy it off them and be like, look, if you're not going to do it, we will. But it was pretty much gone anyway. I think they'd moved their distribution to only California, like during the pandemic.
Yeah, it was actually only 2 months ago when they shut down the distribution.
Oh, really? I thought it was earlier than that, but I certainly haven't seen it in Ontario, and I can't remember how long.
But I mean, it's fascinating to watch people discuss it online because, some of the takes are just not particularly good on it. Like, people don't understand why you would, if you were Sapporo, not be interested in maintaining that brewery.
Mm.
And Sapporo are a very technologically advanced brewery from Hokkaido who do a very specific thing. Like, it's very, Japanese, the attitude towards it. It's like, we're going to make something within a fine tolerance, and it's going to be precisely up to spec. And it's impossible to do that on 123-year-old equipment. It's just like Anchor Steam at its best is kind of this rustic throwback thing. And it's got character, and it's a great beer because it has character. Like that Northern Brewer hop with the minty thing.
Yeah, I always go kind of more parsley is what I get off of it, but totally. It's like chlorophyll.
Yeah, it's in that range.
Yeah.
And, you end up with that characteristic, which is this brash kind of thing that people were making do with in the 19th century, and which Fritz kind of reinvented later.
Yeah.
You've got Sapporo Lager, which is, 50% rice, probably. And
Probably at least, yeah.
it's light and it's very, to give you an idea, I mean, when they were making it in Canada, they made it at the same plant that they're making Pabst at.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it
Is
was.
Pabst a Sapporo product?
Yeah, well, no, it's a Stroh Canada, which is Sleeman.
Oh, so yes, you
Yeah.
just follow the branches back to the trunk.
Well, Sleeman, I think when they opened in '86 or whatever it was, had a 25% investment from Stroh in Detroit. Stroh was still a big deal at that point.
Huh. I didn't realize that at all. Yeah, it's funny actually. Until exactly this moment, I couldn't have told you who made PBR. I'd seen that it was Stroh. I had no idea who that was, but you're right. It does say Guelph, Ontario. Like I said, I haven't really read the can since 1844. Delicious. My thing with Anchor and like the reason why it's worth protecting. So, I mean, everybody knows the story, Fritz saved small craft, pre-craft brewing. Everyone else is consolidating and, racing to the bottom in the name of profit, like whatever. And he was like, no, we're going to make this old style, really esoteric kind of beer. And like, that's very important and everything. But the other thing that I don't know how many people have taken the time to think about this, but Liberty was probably the first American IPA.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not an English IPA. It's an American IPA. And I don't know when it first came out, but it's back there.
1975.
There you go. I was even thinking possibly 80s. And even at that, American IPA didn't exist when that beer was made.
Here's the thing. It didn't exist for the 4 years afterward either. It did so badly the first time they made it with the audience that they didn't make it again until 1980. Like legitimately to celebrate the anniversary of Paul Revere's Ride, I think.
Okay.
And it nobody wanted Cascade hops. This is the thing that is never really mentioned, is that the big brewers didn't want them because they were too flavorful. And I think there's an argument to be made. There's a brewery called New Albion, which I think was Jack McAuliffe or something like that in California, that existed for 3-4 years, that was doing that kind of thing. But, it's the opposite foundational myth from Fritz, which is, we're going to start from the bottom. We're going to start with no money. We're going to do this in our garage and we're going to go out of business.
Right.
Nobody wants to hear that story. It's not very interesting. We've seen a lot of it, honestly. With Fritz Maytag, I think the compelling thing is that here's a guy who has a huge amount of money. He's Stanford educated. And I think when he takes, he's 28 or something like that. And he trusts his own judgment enough to use the Maytag stock that he has in his, basically his inheritance, to say, I believe in this thing, I'm going to do it. I'm going to risk the money that I have. And for some reason, when people tell the story, they don't think about the fact that he, first of all, had a huge amount of money.
Yeah, he could back up a dump truck kind of level of money.
But he didn't. I mean, to his credit, he went and did the thing anyway. But it's a more nuanced story than people really tell it as. It's in the same way that Jim Cook with Sam Adams, he has a Harvard MBA and he was in the same class as Mitt Romney.
Right.
So, when he tells you that he was selling beer out of the trunk of his car, I mean, it was probably a real nice car.
Well, it's a little bit, I mean, it's not exactly the same, but it's a little bit like Bezos always talks about how he pulled up his socks and got to work in his parents' garage with it was like $1 million investment or something like that from his father. It's like, oh yeah, you really had to dig deep there, Jeff. You got the old money rolling in to pay for your server costs for the first 6 years of operation. Yeah.
But I mean, having written a couple of histories, I can say that legitimately the number of people who start something from absolute scratch and continue to be in the industry after 15 years is about 2%.
It's not possible. When people say it takes money to make money, they're not joking.
Yeah, and Ken Woods, from Black Oak for a long time made the observation that if you wanted to make $1 million in craft beer, you probably need to start with 2.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. That's it's helpful. That said, If Anchor is indeed gone, that will be a sad day.
Well, I like the idea that Narragansett swoops in and picks them up.
I genuinely was thinking Boston Beer.
Not a bad idea, really. It's a good fit. They're all throwback brands, but you know, I think Jim is kind of semi-retired at this point, and they've apparently altered the recipe for Sam Adams Boston Lager.
Can you still get Boston Lager in Ontario?
Yeah,
It's another one I haven't seen in ages. Hey, look, my wife wants to watch.
well, it's distributed by Mooseheads.
That fits.
Yeah,
Oh yeah, I remember they did that strategic partnership a while back, right?
yeah.
And they were bringing Moosehead down the eastern seaboard as well.
Well, but I mean, I'm not sure how long that stays in force for because Moosehead now makes Grolsch.
Do they really?
Mhm.
I had no idea. I've lost so much. Like I wasn't really plugged in before the pandemic, and then the pandemic hit, and my beer world became, I was gonna say very small. It became 3 breweries.
Oh, you and everybody else, man. Like,
I missed that Amsterdam got sold. I think I learned about that about 6 months after it happened.
would you just walk into the tap room one day and start talking to Cody?
No, I saw it online. Somebody referenced like there were sellouts or something, and I went, "Oh, sellouts, eh?" And then I looked into it and I went, "Oh, actually, they did literally sell out." That's, I mean, the thing with Amsterdam with that's not really a problem. Like, it's not like they had an owner who was owned a pair of rubber boots. Like it was, I think Jeff was like their 3rd or 4th owner. Like,
Well, the original owner, Roel Bramer, has written his autobiography, and he portrays himself as being some kind of Dutch adventurer. So, like, these places, Amsterdam's what, 1985 for the brew pub, 1986, something like that?
I think they claim 85. Oh, you're right. No, which do they claim? Because I know it's always, they split the hairs that Great Lakes is slightly older than them, but Great Lakes wasn't in Toronto.
Yeah.
So they're like Toronto's oldest craft brewery because Great Lakes beat them by like 8 months, but Great Lakes was originally in Brampton or something like that.
I look at it like this. If you survived for 37 years before selling out, I mean, good Lord. By the time they sold out, they had built a portfolio that included 3-Speed, which is now the 2nd best light beer in the world, according to the US Beer Cup.
Wow. It's pretty good.
Barrel Aged Double Tempest is like one of the most award-winning beers in Canadian history.
Mm-hmm.
I think it won the World Beer Award for best beer one year. Like
that tracks.
It's very difficult to say that they had more to accomplish.
Well, and the other thing is when they dropped that Krone system in and replaced the old brew house with like, what are those 120s or 160s or something like that? Like, those are industrial sized tanks. It's like, oh, I get it. We're looking for profits due to scale. We're looking at putting together numbers that look appealing to people who want to buy a very successful brewery. And that's fine. Like, in a way, the ship had probably sailed when they left Bathurst. Any sense of like, ragtag group of ne'er-do-wells sweating over the brew kettle, the staff clearly are very skilled brewers, but the business plan of the company shifted, and that's fine. Like, I'm not one of those guys who gets upset when a brewery decides they want to get big. Like, that's great.
That's one of the problems that you have with craft beer generally, and the era that we've just come out of, which, let's say for the sake of argument, was like 15 years, like 2008 to 2023. It's a capitalist business. Like, the idea is to sell the thing in volume. Like, it doesn't work any other way.
Yeah.
Like, if my option is to go and buy a can of 3-Speed, sometimes on sale at the LCBO, check your website, folks. Or to buy like a $5 tall can of some IPA with a hop I don't know about.
I was even going to say Bellweiser, like, not a light beer, but like a cold yellow beer.
Like a thing of, potentially middling quality that I'm not completely aware of. Like, it's very difficult to convince anybody of that, especially if you have to go to a tap room in a strip mall in the middle of nowhere. You have to drive there, and you got to like sit on an uncomfortable stool while you drink one beer because you can't drink more than one beer because you got to drive back. And also, the music is chosen by somebody who has terrible taste in music, and the entire room is just Edison light bulbs and exposed brick and uncomfortableness.
And there's a really skeezy guy sitting next to you because he'd been a regular at a bar in the strip mall that closed. And this is the next nearest place that serves alcohol.
Yeah, and that bar would have been called something like Occasions or Gatherings or.
Absolutely. And they had karaoke on Tuesdays.
Absolutely, they did. For that city. It's just, when I moved into this building across the street, there was a bar called the Lazy Lizard. And it was in the basement of a strip mall, which should tell you you're at the bottom of the world, really. And it was part of the Toronto Dart League, and they did have karaoke on Tuesdays.
Mm-hmm.
The fireplace smelled like a deep fryer that hadn't been cleaned in 6 months. Oh, how I miss it.
Well, I was talking with some guys the other day, trying to remember what bar it was. They said it's gone now, but it had gotten done. I'm trying to remember the name of the device, but the thing, you can run it off of a draft setup to recover off-poured beer.
Right.
And then it literally, like, you've plumbed in, and it collects in a service vessel back in the cooler. And then that service vessel has lines, and I think they run off of what's it, with the straw and the Venturi. So they're drawing the off-poured beer back into the draft line at like a 10-to-1 ratio or whatever. But so you recover your lost beer, and it's completely illegal for obvious reasons. But I can't remember which bar it was, but it's like you described, but it was a well-known entity in Toronto, and they finally got done for recycling beer.
I think it was the Brunswick.
But is the Brunswick still open, or are they closed now?
Long since. They're now a Rexall.
Really? I've been in that area. I can't believe I missed that.
Actually, no, it's not a Rexall anymore. Now it's a vintage clothing retailer.
Mm.
Which, I mean, there are only two things you can become if you shut down a bar in Toronto.
I was going to say an A&W or a cannabis shop.
Yeah, pretty much. And any Starbucks that shuts down is going to be a cannabis shop.
Hey, the mushroom shops are on their way.
I'm curious to see what happens with that. I'm sure everybody will have some really interesting afternoons.
There's a Fun Guys mushroom at Queen and Coxwell, so not far from my house. I got to tell you, $60 a quarter. It's a little bit more expensive than street, but not a lot. And it comes in these really nice Ziplocked bags. And I'll say this, the Fun Guys at Queen and Coxwell. So part of the problem is it's like the early days of illegal dispensaries where you have to buzz to get in. And it still feels a little, I don't know, a little clandestine. There's a great one in Kensington called Day Trip, I think is what it's called. And it's I know, but it's it looks like it could be like an IKEA display when you walk in, nice shelving, good lighting, plants. The people are nice and well dressed. The Fun Guys at Queen and Coxwell is nice, but the guy has a neck tattoo, and I got a lot of tattoos, but neck tattoos are another level. And so it doesn't have quite the same shine, when you go in, you're like, oh yeah. You almost expect there to be one of those Bob Marley rugs hanging on the wall or whatever, I
think if you have a neck tattoo, you're precluded from ever saying the following sentence. Your Honor, my client.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Or welcome to the annual shareholders meeting.
Well, if you're part of the Fun Guys board, maybe. I don't know.
Maybe. Our tattoo artist calls any tattoo on the back of your hand or any tattoo on your neck a job stopper.
Yeah. No, I think that's about right.
Yeah. One time I was in and we were looking at this hand and talking about what could I do on the back of this hand that would kind of come out of the sleeve or just do something totally different. And she was like, are you really ready for a job stopper? And I was like, I work for Canada Post. They cannot fire me. I am set.
I'm always amazed by you walk into a cannabis dispensary. I'm shocked by how nice they are as a shopping experience.
some of them are like, it feels like you're almost in a car dealership. Like they're plush.
Well, I mean, some of the ones that like along the Danforth, they have like display cases you have to look down into. It's like, is that a Rolex?
Yeah, no, that's it. It feels like a jewelry shop.
Yeah.
And like you have to ask because like you can't handle it, God forbid. And so you have to ask, and then they'll tell you, oh yeah. And then it's like, oh, it's pretty heady. It's pretty heady. It's like, yeah, is that one heady too? Yeah, that one's pretty heady. Oh, how about I think that's a Fred Armisen bit, isn't it? Fred Armisen has a bit about like, oh yeah, check out this one. Yeah, this one. Oh, it's smooth. It's really heady. My thing is when I go into a cannabis shop, I don't want to think the person selling me the cannabis owns any of the following: a Mexican poncho, a djembe, a didgeridoo, or a hacky sack. Now, 3 of those 4 things are things that I do own.
Yeah. No,
but I don't want this guy selling me my weed to have that.
Do you have what's the one Mexican poncho, right?
That's the one you think I don't have? Exactly.
Thank you.
Oh, no. I don't have a djembe anymore either. I only have 2. Sorry. I don't have a Mexican poncho.
So you've given up the polyrhythmic drumming of Africa.
Yeah, I can't remember what happened to that. I had one for a spell. I think I loaned it to somebody or something.
That's about what would happen with a djembe eventually, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, they get wet and then they smell like goat, which isn't appealing.
Yeah.
I was just looking over my shoulder to see if my didgeridoo was around. It is around here somewhere. Oh yeah, hang on.
And oh, what that didgeridoo?
You know what people say when you play the didgeridoo?
Didgeridoo.
Didgeridoo.
I can't tell whether you're making noise or whether that blew out the speaker.
Oh yeah, no, that was noise. The dog does not like the didgeridoo. The dog is saying didgeridoo. She's saying, in the name of everything sane and holy, didgeridoo ever again.
What's the Tom Waits line? A gentleman is a man who can play the accordion but doesn't.
But doesn't. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I wanted to get a concertina for a while, but that didn't happen.
What? So that you can stroll through Italian restaurants?
No, I was picturing it more like in a sea shanty kind of vibe.
Oh, okay.
Like as a sailor.
That might work.
Might be something.
Ashbridges Bay with a funny hat.
Well, so I have a friend who has a boat at the yacht club at Ashbridges Bay, and he often will take me out sailing. And I thought, oh, wouldn't it be fun if I could wear one of those black and white stripy shirts and like, capri pants or whatever you call it when you're a sailor, and just sit on the deck and play my concertina, sing an old French sea shanty.
But that sounds just fine. I think you'd be great.
I think it'd be fantastic. But anyway, it didn't happen. By the way, do you know that concertinas are very expensive?
Yeah. At this point, when I think about buying a musical instrument, I think to myself, is anything on Max sold? Because
I haven't looked at Max sold in ages. That's a really good, that is where you would find a concertina, and it would be a nice one. It'd be like a 1920s Hohner, and it'd be like, you could probably auction it for $6,000 and it's $60.
Yeah, that's how I almost ended up with a bass trombone. I have no reason to own a bass trombone at this point in my life.
I think anybody has a reason to own a bass trombone.
But it was pretty cool. Like, it was a good quality one.
I have a trombone in here somewhere too. So coming up in high school, and I know you know that we both were tromboners, boners, yes, if you prefer. I don't know if I ever told you the story of my trombone in high school, but there was all those, what was the brand? And they had the hard shell cases, the plastic compression molded ones, and they were real shiny and nice, but they were student trombones.
Well, Yamaha made some like that.
Yeah, it wasn't Yamaha. I think I remember that. Anyway, there was a brand name, and anyway, we had about 6 or 7 of those, and then we had 2 or 3 that were in sort of like a faux tweeted kind of case, and they were older, but they were fine. But again, they were still like student models. And then I found this one that was in this like I don't even know. It looked like pre-war kind of case. It was falling apart. I had to like regularly tape the case back together and stuff. But the trombone was a German made, I don't know what. And it was like, I think the patina was holding it together. And there was like a ding on the end of one of the slide rods. And like, it was just a total mess. And it was dusty and dirty. And I took it and I cleaned it and I got the guy that goes down the slide, the little foxtail brush. Gung was coming out. It looked like you know what the pimple popping videos people are into, or used to be. I don't know if people are still into that. I never was, but it was like that. The amount of stuff coming out of this trombone slide, it was like a pimple popping video. And I got it all nice and clean. And it was one of the nicest instruments I've ever played. The tone was sublime. Its playability, once it was lubed back up, was like just delightful. It was amazing. And I played it all the way through high school. And then obviously I couldn't take it with me, so I left it. But then years later, a friend of mine's dad was like, "Oh, I got a trombone I'm not using. Why don't you take it?" But again, it was a student model. And I started playing it and I was like, I know I'm out of shape, but I don't think I'm this bad. And I realized after playing for a while, I'm like, it actually, the construction of the instrument really does make a difference. It ain't just a tube with a horn on the end of it.
No, I mean, at some point during high school, I switched from like the basic model trombone to tenor and then bass, because in symphonic band, you need somebody who can play bass trombone. And I have big lungs, large torso, you know, and
Yeah.
Like the sound quality was tremendous. We were in the IB program in high school, so music was one of my higher level subjects, and I ended up doing the Rimsky-Korsakov concerto for trombone as like my performance piece for the exam. And it was, you know, periodically you realize you're never going to get better at a thing. You know, like, okay, I've reached the point that I'm going to be able to get to. And at the time, there was a very popular trombone player called Christian Lindberg, who's from Denmark. And he had a thing called the motorcycle concerto.
Oh, wow. I don't know if I'm familiar with that somehow.
Well, it involved triple tonguing and also humming while you were playing in order to get a differential sound between the tone that you were producing through the horn and the tone that you were producing as like a kind of like a didgeridoo, like as a sub, you know. And I kind of looked at that and I went, that guy's not making a living and he's the best in the world. Maybe I'm not going to be a boner professionally.
Did you watch Brooklyn Nine-Nine?
No, well, yes, I've seen it.
So there's a bit in it where the chief, who's, you know, this very straight edge.
Of course, he's played by Brower.
Exactly, yeah. And he's in a dither because there's been a theft, and it's this world-renowned oboist who him and his husband have seen a number of times, and he's going to personally deal with the case. And so him and Peralta are going to work the case together. And it turns out that the oboist was doing an insurance job. He was claiming the oboe because he's broke.
Oh, yeah. So I decided not to be a trombone player, and I decided on beer writing instead.
Yeah, you hit that one out of the park.
Well, swings and roundabouts.
Yeah. I had a funny one with my high school music teacher in grade 11. Grade 12, actually, I had a teacher who, her and I hated each other so much. That's why I stopped playing trombone. I possibly would have like gotten my own trombone coming out of high school and continued playing, but I hated her so much and she hated me so much. And I was a teenager, so, you know, we do stupid things. But in grade 11, my high school music teacher was a guy who'd been a studio saxophonist, played soprano as well as alto and tenor. But he had a bit of a problem with the drink, and so had stopped working in jazz and become a teacher. really, unfortunately, he continued to have a problem with alcoholism because it turns out it wasn't just exposure to the jazz cats that were causing that. But he told me towards the end of my grade 11 year, he said, he was like, Chris, you're not a natural musician. Like, okay, I'm curious where this conversation's going. He's like, but you've become proficient enough at trombone that if you wanted to, you could become a studio musician on the jazz circuit, because studios are always looking for reliable horn players that can just show up and sit in a session. And he's like, you absolutely have the chops to do that. And he's like, I can introduce you to some people when you graduate, like, let me know. I said, oh, cool. All right. Thank you, sir. I'll give that some thought or whatever. And then obviously had this experience with his other teacher, and I'm out of here. But I just love that he was like, you're not a natural musician. And I'm like, oh, thanks a lot. You are. I get it. Okay. I get it. I'm working really hard over here.
We had a music teacher like that, just about grade 11 as well. Our guy, he'd been a drummer on the jazz scene, and he was kind of an acid burnout. But he was a pretty good administrator for the music program. And he was a very good drummer. Like, he would sit in and he'd play, and he'd be able to like intuitively explain what he wanted from the jazz ensemble, for example, like just by gesturing.
Mm.
We're all sitting there and we're listening to Parliament, and we're listening to Earth, Wind and Fire and like these horn sections, and he decides that at an all boys school, what we're going to do is cover A Whole New World from Disney's Aladdin. And we're going to do that in our assembly. And we're all sitting there like, okay, we could do that. Why are we doing that? And it took him a while to explain it. And then he realized that we were going to need a female vocalist from the girls' school down the street.
Was that Havergal?
BSS. So he's trying to like forge a relationship between the two music departments so that we have a social life. And we didn't understand that he was trying to do us a solid.
He said, guys,
yeah,
trying to get you a date.
Yeah.
All boys school, slim pickings.
Yeah, it absolutely was.
Do you have a memory? I want to get back onto beer, by the way, but do you have a memory? Because I think everybody, I was going to say our age, I think we're in the same zone. Remembers at some point, I'm 1980.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, yeah, exactly the same age. Everyone I know who played in band in high school had the memory of the time that the teacher bought the score for the theme for Jurassic Park. And then you played it and went, oh my gosh, I guarantee it did not sound the same, but it sounds the same as in the movie. And the horn, the French horns are coming. And you get chills playing that song. It was the most delightful thing ever. Did you have this in your band experience?
I'm not sure we had that one specifically, but anything John Williams has scored so, I don't want to say simply, it's not like massively complicated music from a rhythmic perspective or anything. And if you're in a wind ensemble, it's going to be simplified down further. So we mostly did like, Ralph Vaughan Williams, Percy Eldridge Granger, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Those are all ringing bells. Yeah. Did you ever do a song that was called Creed? It was this like really anthemic, but also kind of militaristic piece. I remember literally we learned it one time for the Remembrance Day assembly.
Yeah.
And there was like, it starts with a kind of drum thing. And then the trumpets came and like, it felt like you were playing in a military band.
Yeah. I'm not sure we ever had that one. We did at one point have a wind ensemble piece called Gevorkende Fanfare.
I don't think I know that.
And it started out with like double tongue horns in unison. It's like kind of Finlandia-esque.
Oh yeah.
So that kind of thing. But
did you ever do the Great Gate at Kiev from the Pictures of the Gallery piece?
No.
It's what's it used in? It was used in something, and everyone always thinks it's the theme from, but the deal, and I remember our teacher told us, It was my wife left, by the way. Apparently, high school band conversation, not appealing to the missus.
You might have other things to do.
There's a point at the end, and it's building this musical piece. And so the deal was, he told us it had to be the last thing that the symphony played, because the brass players would literally blow out their embouchures playing the part. I can't even remember what it was called when there was 3 Fs. Like there's like fortissimo is 2, but then sometimes you would get a third one, and it's like you got to blow the hell out of this. And then after that, there was a crescendo.
Oh, for God's sake.
And it's like, oh yeah. And I remember playing it for the band concert, and I think it was a device that he was using to just make us play harder, but thinking, oh, I need to literally ruin my mouth playing this song. And like, we were done and I couldn't talk right because my lip, like I had no muscle tone left in my mouth from having blown as hard as I did. It was and again, thinking back, it probably sounded awful.
Yeah, I want to say that like we had, in addition to the bands, we had musicals every year. So the musicians would generally be in a pit band. And I forget whether it was How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying or whether it was Jesus Christ Superstar. But the lead trumpet player, Mark, he dropped acid before the final performance of it. And apparently in his score, he had written in pen, high notes equal death, play death loud. I'm not quite.
That's a hell of a note.
All right, go for it, man. And he did.
Do it. That's funny. Hey, so back to beer, because my high school band, wasn't that delightful? It was all the didgeridoos' fault. No, we got there from a cannabis shop. How did we get there from a cannabis shop?
Well,
I'm opening another beer, by the way. I'm out of PBR.
Because you got high and you wanted to buy a concertina. That's why.
I don't think I was high when I wanted to buy the concertina. I saw Steve Martin playing the concertina in Only Murders in the Building. And I thought, oh, concertina. All right. And then I started pricing out concertinas, and I priced myself out of a concertina.
Extraordinarily deceptively difficult. I was at Ufleku in Prague, and they had a wandering accordion player.
Yeah.
And I think he got through I Kissed a Girl and I Liked It. You know?
Accordions are a whole different thing, because you also have to be able to play the piano to play an accordion.
Right. But
I just want the chord buttons.
Like he wandered over to the table and got somebody to play the chord buttons while he was doing the thing. And like the learning curve on that's got to be astronomical. It's terrible.
Did you see the Weird Al movie, the one that Daniel Radcliffe was in?
No, I keep meaning to. It's like Cocaine Bear. It's on the list, you know?
Yeah, I got to see Cocaine Bear too. They were showing Cocaine Bear over at the Fox a couple months back now, I think. And I was like, oh, we got to go see that. We got to go see that. And then we didn't go see it, so I missed it.
Oh, well.
I didn't realize that what's her name? She was the chick in the Lego movie.
With Banks.
Yes, thank you, Elizabeth Banks. She was one of the exec producers, in addition to acting in it. It's like her movie. So I like her sense of humor a lot. No, I was going to say, what was I saying? Oh, about a movie that's like Cocaine Bear. I don't know, it's gone. Back to cannabis shops. For 420.
3 layers up. Yeah, okay.
So I've got a theater just over here. It's about 100 meters right over there, called the Fox. It's a single screen, old timey theater. It was the first theater I ever went to that was licensed, and all they had at the time was Left Field and Collective Arts. So it was like, yeah, like sign me up. We don't go as often as we would like, and then obviously pandemic. During the pandemic, every Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, or maybe just Friday and Saturday, a staff member would come in and would fire up the popcorn maker, and you could come and buy bags of popcorn to then take home and watch a movie at home, but with movie theater popcorn. Genius. Anyway, for 420, except it was 421 because 420 was a Thursday, but for 420 on 421, they showed Dazed and Confused. And so Eric and I were going to go watch it. So that day while I was at work, there's I think it's Spirit Leaf. It's a middling head shop. They're nice. There are some guys with scruffy beards and dreadlocks, so give or take. But I walked in, and actually it was one of the really cute all-American boys was working, and I'm sure he's Canadian, by the way. But I said, I go, hey, what can I help you with? I'm here to buy weed. I said, the Fox is showing.
Such a generic question.
Yeah, can I help you with something? Yeah, I mean, sell me some weed, man. I know they want to know if I want an edible or a pre-roll or flower. I get it. But anyway, I go, yeah, the Fox is playing Dazed and Confused tonight. And he's like, oh, wicked, cool. Yeah, yeah. And I go, so what I want to buy a pre-roll, a really stupid big joint. Yeah. Like when you go to the cigar shop and you just buy the biggest cigar they physically have, like that's what I want. And he was like, okay, come with me. And he's like, these pre-rolls here all contain, what was the word he used? Something. It wasn't distillate, because I know what that is, but it was another word. And I went, okay. And he goes, they're really strong. And I was like, cool. And he goes, this one's birthday cake. And I was like, birthday cake? That sounds awesome. He's like, but it's not as strong as this one, which is smaller. And it tastes like, I can't remember what. And he's like, but this one is crazy. And I was like, you know what? Give me both. So we took them, and we had the crazy one first. And
it's in Pulp Fiction.
Right.
It costs a little bit more, but it's a madman.
Yeah. Oh, and this one was like, we didn't finish it. I think I left probably a quarter of the joint and just chucked it and went in and watched it. And then adorably went in, and we went into the, get some beers, and went into the theater and sat down, and we looked around, and about half of the crowd, we were weirdly in the middle of the age for watching the movie.
Yeah, no.
Because about half the crowd was older than us, not by a lot, but like, I don't really identify as Gen X. Like 80 were right in the middle, but like, I always kind of think of myself on the younger side of that, but like people more like my sister's age. But then people, like, there was a gap, and then people about 10 years younger than us and younger. And the first time McConaughey walked into the camera shot, the entire place clapped.
Yeah.
And every time he delivered any line, everybody clapped and laughed. And like, it was like a McConaughey love fest. I was like, this is amazing. And I was crazy high. So
good at it. I mean, there's this brilliant shot that Linklater gets as they're walking into the arcade. And it's like McConaughey in the middle.
Yes. Yeah.
Like a long-haired kid in pink. But I mean, it's like, these are the good guys. And it's framed as though these are the protagonists of the film in a really straightforward and completely unmissable sort of way. And he also, like, he has this great line in it, which is where he's talking about his car. He's like, it's got Edelbrock intakes, man. Blow your doors clean off.
Yeah. And he's teasing the other guys, like, I've seen this. You can order that off the back page of the Archie comics.
It's so good.
But so, you know, the deal with that, he wasn't even supposed to be a talking extra. He was hired as a background actor, and they kind of liked the look of him. And they were like, can we give you a line? And he was like, yeah, all right. And so they gave him a line, and he just nailed it so hard. They were like, okay, hang on a minute. And like, so Linklater was like literally rewriting the script on the fly and was like, oh, let's actually, what if we did that? Okay, in this scene, try doing this. And like got him to do a bit and was like, perfect. He ended up becoming like the talisman of the movie, but he was hired as just a background player. And he was just so good. They were like, we can't not use this guy. He's perfect.
I love that, like, how impressionable everybody else is in the movie, because he's the only character that has graduated and has a job.
Yeah. Him and Ben Affleck. Ben Affleck's in a bit of a weird zone.
Oh, O'Banion, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Because he intentionally failed so he could paddle the kids the second year.
Well, it's Texas in the 1970s. There's not a lot to do. But with McConaughey, there's like the Oh, you know, I'm working for the city, man. Puts money in my pocket.
Yeah.
And later in the movie, the kid, I forget the kid's name, Mitch,
Yeah. Mitch. Yeah.
trying to buy something at a convenience store. It's like probably he's getting a bottle of whiskey or something.
No, they're at the arcade and the black guy's playing pool and he goes, "Hey there, son, take this money over there, get me a 6-pack at the shop, bring it on back." And he's like testing him. And yeah, so he goes in and he just replicates it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Puts money in my pocket. Well, here's some more money for your
Money in your pocket. Exactly.
I think we snuck in to see that in grade 7. Is that right? Was that like 1992?
It was I think it was the 20th anniversary when we saw it. So it was probably 93.
So, like, I saw that at Canada Square up at Yonge and Eglinton.
Yeah.
Bunch of UCC kids who would, I guess we probably had a Friday where we didn't have to dress in uniform or something.
Yeah, it was Civvies Day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we actually get into the movie because we're 13, you know.
I can't remember when I didn't see it when it came out. I don't think I saw it in theaters. I think I saw it on. Oh no, that's not true. I think I did. I think I saw it at the Scarborough Town Center.
Yeah. You
Yeah, I think I did actually. Now that I say that, but when I rewatched it, I was revisited with the memory that kind of grade 9, grade 10 Chris,
yeah.
my two major role models at that point in my life were Slater from Dazed and Confused. And I don't even know what you're saying right now, man. I don't know what's on. And Serial Killer from Hackers, who's Matthew Lillard.
Of course, right. Hack the Gibson, hack the planet. Yeah.
That was literally who I was like, if I could be anybody, it would be somewhere between those two guys.
So you chose the stoner and the really nerdy guy.
Really nerdy. And I think he was straight edge in the movie. I don't think that was stated, but I don't think they did any drugs or consumed any alcohol in the movie Hackers.
No, I don't think so. Yeah.
Was there drugs? There might have been a drug scene and Johnny Lee Miller did it with Angelina Jolie, but.
Right, because of course that's Angelina Jolie. Yeah, I was trying to remember who it was.
That very, very pivotal scene for me as a young fella when he's having the dream, but they're staging it. So it seems, and she walks into his bedroom and she's got that mod style motorcycle leather jacket on and she unzips it. And of course she doesn't have anything on underneath. And as like a 13-year-old or whatever, I was like, oh my gosh, like every hormone in my body has just hit full capacity right now.
Oh yeah, there are, there are things that'll do that to you.
Yep. Johnny Lee Miller was great. Hey, we're still not talking about beer, but that's okay. Those were great movies.
Okay, no, they were probably drinking Lone Star.
Probably. Oh man, I love the bit in the end of the party bit from Dazed and Confused when people are leaving and Parker Posey is like can hardly keep upright and they're like falling all over each other. And I was just like, yeah, I don't do that anymore. And I'm not upset about that, but man, that looks real fun.
So that was mostly in university.
Yeah.
Like, the problem with going to a fairly strict all boys school is there wasn't a lot of chance to do that kind of socializing.
Yeah, I had a weird one because I split my time. I was all over the map in high school. As discussed, I was in the band. So you're in band and symphony and jazz and you have class. And then I improved, like I did improv games. And so was in that and a bit of drama. I think we did 2 productions. I didn't do a lot of them. So I did that, but I also played rugby.
Yeah.
So I had that group too, but I was also the church boy going to youth group every Thursday night. Right. So I had these it was like a Venn diagram where it didn't actually touch. I just had 3 circles.
When you think back on that, because I had a lot of similar kind of experience, a lot of different responsibilities and all that. When you think about the amount that you're scheduled now, and you think about the extent to which you were scheduled in high school, doesn't it seem a little daunting?
Yeah. And I mean, so because I work with I haven't done a lot of stuff with teenagers recently. I do a bit of work coaching with rugby, but mostly I work with younger kids.
Yeah.
But when because I've done these trips, right? We do these learning and service trips and we take kids from the neighborhood to other places. And like, so the trip itself, that's neither here nor there, but we try and do like a year's worth of work leading up to it, partially fundraising, partially team building. And even though, like, I think back and I'm like, well, I had improv 2 nights a week. I had rugby training 2 nights a week. Youth group was on Thursday, but it was later. It was 7:30. So there would be days. I remember I literally went to youth group one day in my rugby kit, covered in mud with blood on my shirt, because I had to get to youth group. And I just left rugby training, got on a bus and went to church. But it never felt difficult. Like I also still was able to hop on my bike and go hang out with friends and smoke cigarettes outside of a donut shop or whatever. And I look at kids now and we're trying to like, we'll say, okay, in 3 weeks, can we meet for 90 minutes to do a team building thing? Oh, which day? Oh, like Saturday. Oh, I've got lacrosse. I've got equestrian. I've got junior debate. Like everybody's got something. And I'm like, guys, it's Saturday. Like, what are you doing with yourselves?
I have this pet theory that mostly people don't actually have a whole lot of stuff on, but they like to pretend that they do, because there's nothing more satisfying than not doing things.
I think for our age, you get a lot of that. These kids are 100% doing, like, they go.
Yeah.
They're doing things before school, and then they go to school, and they're doing things after school. And I'm like, what the hell, man?
No, I mean, it's real odd. I remember, like, you'd finish school. I think we had time to go and get a cup of coffee somewhere in like the St. Clair Village.
Yeah.
Walk back. Then you had band, and like sometimes you'd stay at school until like 9 o'clock at night doing homework, just because it was easier than going home. Because it's one of those situations where you're so overscheduled that you don't want to have a conversation about what you've done that day, because it's eating into the things that you need to accomplish.
Yeah. It's bonkers.
Not an ideal way to live.
Well, it's funny. I mean, my son Ben, he's going to be 15 in 2 weeks.
Right.
And so Ben has a theater program on Friday nights. On Mondays and Wednesdays, he's coaching with me, coaching the little guys. On Tuesday and Thursday, he has his own training. He didn't join the band at school this year, but he wants to next year. So that'll be there. He also plays not just club rugby, he plays school rugby. So during that season, he also has that. And then as well at the weekend, he has games or tournaments and church stuff. And it's like, he's not as bad as some of the kids I know, but even him, I look at him like, dude, when do you do your homework? Top secret, he doesn't.
I think a lot of them do. I don't know. What kind of beer are you drinking anyway?
This is a juicing. That's all I got. I ran out of PBRs and I have 2 or 3 of these. And actually, spoilers, I'm going to be jumping on the pod with Ben tomorrow night, his podcast. So I need to save at least one of these, because it's one of the few Hazy Boy beers that he will accept.
Well,
he does not like New England IPAs.
Well, here's the thing. Like, if you could get the same New England IPA all the time, it would be acceptable. I mean, Juicin's a one-off. It's a seasonal, right? It's not like one of their core lineup.
Yes, but it's a long seasonal. I think they make it for summer. So like you get it kind of in May and it peters out in September or something, I think.
Fair enough. But, the issue with shelf stability is such that beer is not going to be the same 2 months in that it is 3 weeks in.
Oh, yeah. No, like it's risky business buying it from the LCBO. Like this one is packaged June 6th. Yeah. So it's 6 weeks old.
Yeah.
Five and change.
Well,
now, the good news is my local LCBO has, as many do, all of the beers in a walk-in cooler. But that's only the beer that's on sale, because they also have a storage room which is not refrigerated, which is problematic.
I never thought about that, but you're absolutely right. That thing's a Potemkin village.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It's kind of window dressing.
Yeah.
Once the beer is shelved, it gets refrigerated again. But until then, it's just in the back storage room.
Oh man.
And I know that because I've been in that storage room and it ain't refrigerated and there's beer everywhere.
Yeah, I always found that interesting. For a while, I got to do tastings for Great Lakes.
Oh, that's hard living.
Oh, it's not great, man.
I did that when I worked for Double Trouble.
Yeah, because you got like a 4-hour shift at the LCBO, and even if nobody walks in and nobody's interested, you got to stand there looking chipper.
Wait, so were you doing front of house or back of house tasting? Because I think we're talking about two different things.
Front of house mostly.
Yes. So I was doing back of house tasting, which is you go in to educate the staff about the beer. It's the worst. It's free. So the front of house you have to pay. Like that's a thing. And I mean, like you say, I bet it's murder. Like, especially if they give you some random weird beer. Oh, take the ghosts. People love a ghost. Go ahead and explain why this beer is salty. But no, I had to do staff education once. So you're doing the same thing, except you're in the break room.
Yeah.
And so you're standing there and you're all chipper. And like you've walked around the front and introduced yourself to all the staff. Hey, how you doing, staff? My name's Chris. I got some interesting beers. You might like to have a sip. Come on back when you're on break and we'll do a little tasting. So I'm back there one time. And so I was at the one, I think it was like in Oakville or somewhere. And there was this kid who was full-time, but like, 20 soaking wet. And he was really keen. And he's like, oh, tell me more about this. And so I'm like, we're drinking some beers and talking about brewing methods and I don't know what, having the kind of conversation that actually you're really hoping to have. And this woman walks in, she's staff. And I feel like the uniforms changed a bit, but at the time, I don't think they had gendered shirts. I think they just had a shirt and they weren't flattering on anybody. Like they weren't good for dudes or chicks. They were just bad in general. Yeah, and I just remember it was like so boxy, but she also had it tucked into her pants. And those glasses where the arms come out and then they dip down and they connect to the bottom of like big square lenses, but they were smoked. So they were like dark at the top, fading to lighter at the bottom, like smoked. And she had the chains coming off of it. And she had that 80s puffy at the front, like lanky down the back haircut. And she stank of DeMaurier cigarettes. Yeah. So mental picture. So she walks in and I go, hey, how are you doing? And she goes, I'll be doing a lot better in 8 months, 4 days, and 3 hours. And I went, retirement day? And she went, it can't come soon enough. And then like walked off. And I was like, okie doke.
See that level of esprit de corps.
She did not care about craft beer.
No. Who does really?
Maybe she does now. Maybe she retired and she turned over a new leaf.
It's entirely possible.
By the way, I wanted to say, speaking of hazy IPAs, have you had is it Two Loons, the IPA?
Not yet. No, it's
Jason's. Yeah, you need to get some of that in you.
Right.
Double quick. It's so like juicing, delightful, aromatic, very tropical, very peachy. And like this is the Ben Johnson mark. Like it just doesn't have enough actual physical bitterness. There's just not enough alphas in there. You know what I mean? It's too smooth. It's too juicy. But the Two Loons, I actually talk about this a lot. New England IPA, ostensibly the formative beer for that was Heady Topper.
Yeah.
Heady Topper's pretty bitter.
Yeah.
Like it's not just aroma hops. Like I guarantee you they were putting bittering hops in that beer.
I want to say it's like 70 BU or something.
Yeah, it's significant. But so the Two Loons, the thing that it reminded me a lot of is High Lie from Cigar City.
Okay.
Yeah.
Slightly cedary kind of note to it.
Totally. And like the bitterness is touching on sticky. Like it's almost resinous. It's nice. but with that really tropically cloudy thing. It's good.
Well, I'll give that a shot. I'm
Yeah.
curious to see what they do with the 3-barrel brew house, but
Is that what he's using?
well, no, because he's got the two major brands contracted because they have,
Yeah.
I think, another SKU. But the Brock Street location, they bought the brew house from Amsterdam, the Longo's location,
Right.
which is like a real small brew house.
Yeah.
So, I'm hoping they haven't undershot it, but at the same time, like, they're in the old Malabar costume warehouse. So,
I thought he was up at Stockyards.
no, that's Shacklands.
Got it.
Because he left
yeah.
Shacklands 21 or something.
Okay. I thought Shacklands was his. He was just an employee at Shacklands.
I think that there was a miscommunication about the achievable goals that the partners in the business thought they could manage.
No fooling.
Yeah, like selling beer.
Did you see Five Paddles just reopened under new ownership? Didn't even know they were for sale.
Oh yeah, they've been for sale for about a year.
Well, when I Googled it, I discovered, so obviously I know Little Beasts is, and that's awful. And that's just a giant mess, but I was aware of that. But Five Paddles was also for sale, and somebody else was also, they were like, there's 3 breweries for sale in Durham right now. I was like, oh, how about that?
Well, the problem is that, like, Oshawa is not a terribly sophisticated market.
It's challenging.
It's called the Dirty Schwa for a reason. I mean,
I love Five Paddles. I didn't get in there nearly enough recently, but man, that brewery had just the right vibe for me.
Well, it's nice. And I mean, like, the idea that you had a bunch of different cooks in the kitchen meant that you did have variety, but at the same time, they were also trying to keep, last time I was there, like 5 or 6 different yeast varieties alive at once because they had so much stuff they wanted to do. I think that's a hard way to do business. Like, if you're thinking about running a brewery with a lot of people, potentially the only successful model in Ontario is Together We're Bitter.
Yeah.
Which I should get back to. I always liked that a lot.
Yeah. I was just telling somebody, frig, I can't remember who it was. I was having a conversation like literally yesterday, and they were like, it's so funny. This is actually hilarious. They said, I know exactly who it was. It was my buddy Matt. He's one of the coaches. He coaches U10 with me. Mm-hmm. And oh man, actually, I gotta back the story out just slightly more. By the way, we're getting late. I assume you don't have anywhere you have to be. Yeah, all right, cool.
No, that's for the evening. So
I upgraded my Zoom back to Pro, so I don't have any time limits. So we're fine. Our limit is, oh no, I was gonna say 5 gigabytes, but that's only on cloud. I've just got the limit of my drive, which is like 1.5 terabytes, so we're fine. We were talking. We had a tournament yesterday over at Woodbine Beach. Beautiful, lovely. Oh, so good. And then we go back to the clubhouse, sitting on the patio having some beers. And so yeah, my buddy Matt goes, the classic. He goes, it's just, I feel like every time I go to a craft brewery, it's all hoppy IPAs. Like, I know, man. I know. So I said, things are changing. And he's like, well, like, where in the area? So he's a beach guy, right? He goes, where in the area? Where am I going to go get something that isn't just, just the hot bomb? I said, buddy, you are geographically closer to at least the best brewery in the country and maybe in the continent than almost anybody else. I was like, turn right on Coxwell, stop at Gerard, you're done, man. Yeah, you will not find a hop driven beer aside from maybe one. Everything else, they have hops because they're supposed to, but they're balanced, and a lot of them are lagers, and you're going to be very happy there. And I was like, and dude, you must have been to left field. And he's like, oh yeah, no, I like left field. It's just kind of hard to get to. I'm like, yeah, no, I get that. You got to walk into it, whatever. And then I said, and what about Rorschach? You go to Rorschach? And he's like, yeah, I've been there a couple times. They got a lot of, I'm like, yeah, I know they do a lot of IPAs, but they do a lot of other things. Like, It's a big menu. There's a lot of beers.
Ice lager is very good. They got that one that's got shikawasu in it.
Yeah, yeah. They did. Did you? I screwed myself up one time. I totally misread. I didn't misread. I read exactly what the words were, but I misunderstood what those words meant. Um, they had a beer. So Rorschach does a beer called Hireth, which is like a pale lager,
Yeah.
and it's really, really good. And I don't know why it isn't back yet, but it's a summer beer. They're like, oh, we only brew it in the summer, and I drink it by like the flat in the summer. Like PBR falls out of my fridge when Hireth is around because it's so good. And I love it. But anyway, this was a month and a half ago, maybe. And I was like, oh, is Hireth in it? No, Hireth's not in it. All right. I went, oh, I said it was called Dewey Mountain Lager. And I saw Mountain Lager, and I associated it. I thought it was a light lager. I thought they were talking about like the Rocky Mountain Cold, or like they were replicating a Coors Light. I was like, yeah, I just want a cold yellow beer. Just give me 6 of those. No. Mountain Dew. That's what they were referencing. They were referencing Mountain Dew. And I got to tell you, that beer tasted like Mountain Dew.
Well, yeah. I mean, they're very good at doing that thing.
I don't like Mountain Dew.
No. I was talking to Matt about it one time when he was doing the smoothie beers, because they were in fashion for a bit. And they're not doing them as much anymore because...
Yeah, not sad to see those gone.
Well, no, but the thing is, we were talking about recipe design, and how do you come up with the fruit blends that you're going to use in your beers? Like, it must take a lot of research to figure out what's going to go with what. And he said, I look at what they're doing at Booster Juice, and then I do that. Literally copying stuff from their menu.
Seems fair.
Yeah, well, it exists. You know, we did a collab with them last year, I guess, 2 years ago, called Fancy Lads. It was a lemon sherbet IPA.
Yeah. Oh no, I picked up a lot of that. I really enjoyed it.
And I think I'm going to try to get Fancy Lads back into the market. I don't think it's going to be the lemon sherbet one. See, we envisioned it as a series of different cartoon characters. So
Okay.
Lemon Lad, who was on the last one, and the next one's Peanut Butter Boy. So I have an idea for a 1890s cookie-inspired, Toronto-centric peanut butter beer.
Yeah, I was thinking, just even as you said that, like everyone immediately goes, "Oh, it's a peanut butter stout." And I go, "Okay, yeah. I mean, I know people do that. People do that." I would like to see drive like a biscuity malt with the peanut butter flavor. Yeah, now we're back into, now we're cooking again.
What I want to do is use toasted oats. Like, I want to get like some kind of golden naked oat and then toast it so you get additional flavor. And I don't think it would screw with the fermentability that much.
I mean, I don't think it would in general, and certainly probably not at the level of like percentage you're talking about. Like that's not going to be 50% of the grain bill or something.
No.
God help you, it'd be really expensive. For years, I only ever saw naked oats written down,
Mhm.
like in a beer recipe, or somebody's describing their beer. And because sometimes you would also see flaked oats
Sure.
written down, I always read that as naked oats. Rhymes with flaked. And I literally, one time, I can't remember who it was I asked. I was like, and I hadn't, like, the penny hadn't dropped yet. Like, it wasn't like I was aware of the other and I was choosing naked. I was just like, it's naked. What is a naked oat? What does that even mean? And I asked somebody, I said, what's a naked oat? And they were like, do you mean naked? And I went, yeah, that's exact. And also, thank you for answering the question. Got it. Isn't English a funny old language?
I was explaining earlier today to the students about fuggle hops.
Right.
And I think I said to them, and it's a fun word to say. Go ahead,
great.
Walk down the street saying fuggle to yourself.
Yeah.
Don't let anybody judge you.
No, it's fantastic. I do love a fuggle.
Yeah.
That lemon sherbet beer you're talking about. So that was, correct me if I'm wrong, this was a lemon driven, there was vanilla. No, lactose.
Vanilla,
Lactose.
right, yeah.
Was there vanilla too?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think Matt controlled the dosing on that, so we didn't see how much went in, but it's there.
So literally, I think I bought it one time. They were still, I think, I don't know if they still have the side retail window, if it's still operational, but it was a few weeks ago. It was at the side retail window. And I think I was buying some Higher and then I saw this is a fancy lad, and it said like brewed in collaboration, and oh, that's interesting. And I read the description, and I went, "Oh, I'll give it a shake." And so I think I literally bought one,
Yeah.
And then I had it, and I went, "Oh," because the thing is, conceptually, I don't think I had a problem with it conceptually. What I think I had a problem with was whether or not it could be pulled off, whether or not it worked. And it was so good. And I tend not to I don't like, I was saying to you earlier when we were planning this, I don't really like sour beers particularly myself. That's just not a thing I get down to. Um, I don't love lactose driven beers with the exception of milk stouts. Like a milk stout I'll roll with, but otherwise a lot of the time I'm like, actually the times I'm happiest with a lactose driven beer is when you can't taste the lactose in it.
Thing is, it's always a question of degree, right? Like, when people are designing stuff, I think they're at a disadvantage, especially if you're a young brewer, because you think that whatever the secret ingredient is, it has to be the focus of the thing. Now,
Right.
if you put on the label, I said this to Black Bellows years ago because they had an elderflower saison or something, and it's just like, okay, if you put elderflower on the label, I need to be able to taste it. It needs to be really obvious. And if you say lemon sherbet, I mean, it's not really like you can't put that ingredient in. You're replicating another flavor profile. So I think the longer you're around and the more context you have for how flavors have developed in beer, the better shot you have at creating something that is moderately subtle and that can actually accomplish that end. Because, we're very skeptical of lactose. I don't really like lactose in beer. I don't really like fruit puree in beer. Vanilla, sure. I mean, I did that a long time ago. But, if you can get all those things to work together and you can make it sort of more than the sum of its parts without being overwhelming, it's really good. I mean, you have to have a healthy respect for the historical portion of it where, like, you don't want to just make something that's only fruit puree.
Right.
Because at that point, it's not really beer.
I mean, that's even kind of getting into what happens with New England IPAs, where it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, I get it. It's a malt fermented beverage that's carbonated. But really what we're doing here is we're making a hop, not quite a tea, but yeah, like a hop extraction that we're slightly offsetting with some malt and carbonating.
Yeah.
But like what you're drinking it's hop juice. And I mean, I'm not using that derogatorily, but that's what it is.
Yeah. And like at some point, the fashion for that is going to fall away. One of the things you have to remember if you're a young brewer is that you're brewing for an audience of like a diverse audience of people. Just satisfying your own ego because you're playing with the ingredient and it's satisfying, which it is it's not a good sales strategy. It's not like it's going to work out in the long term for you.
Well, I mean, the other thing that you brought up, and actually, like referencing the beer that you guys did with Rorschach specifically, I assume it wasn't iterated out, but it was just the reality of a good idea. So somebody who had some knowledge and some understanding of what they wanted to actually do, meeting with a skilled brewer who is like, I can figure this one out. Like we can get there. We don't have to make 7 versions of this before we land on it. But with like a beer that you want to actually make, so like juicing has been iterated.
Sure.
The first time I had it, it didn't taste wildly different, but for a little while there, Sam was tweaking dials. You know what I mean? Not in a way that like, oh, that was bad and we have to fix it, but in a way that like, we can do this better. we can adjust this. We can get somewhere else with this. And iterating beers out like that, especially if it's something that you actually want to, again, like what you made with Rorschach, delicious and delightful. Are they going to make it again? Like you say, maybe once or something, maybe down the line, maybe you'll do a different one with them. But like, that's not a beer that's going to land in their portfolio, and that's fine. But what you do get is exactly like you say, like you're like, someone's like, oh, I'm going to make this IPA and I'm going to dump, 8 liters of mango puree into it. And then they do, and you taste it and you're like, what was the thing that made you decide on that volume of mango puree? It's like, oh, well, it's the size of the bucket, and it's like, oh, so not experience at all. Like,
I, it's always difficult when you have that, because like some of the best beers in Ontario are those iteratively developed things. Like Bone Shaker started out as a hops every 5 minute Amarillo only.
It was a knockoff of 60 Minute.
Yeah.
I remember you and I were at the brewery the first day it was ever brewed, and Bartle was brewing it. And Ian was like, dude, you have to stand on the platform and just keep throwing hops in every couple of minutes.
Yeah. I mean, just crazy. What I will say is, like, you're very lucky if you get a brewer who can realize a vision that you have. Like, I did a collab beer last year with Spearhead called Dragon Slayer. And it's an ESB, and it was based on a beer that I'd tried in London in 2018. John Keeling was retiring from Fuller's. So he'd made a 1972 version of the ESB. Went back and found the recipe and figured out how to do it so it was authentic to the original ESB recipe for Fuller's. And, I'm sitting there going, we could recreate that. Nobody's really doing an ESB anymore. And I put it together from memory and through, various things I'd read about Fuller's ESB in the day. And I sent it to Jacob and Thomas at Spearhead. And they were like, this is what we think we should do. And, they were kind enough to make some tweaks based on recommendations that I had from context that they didn't have. But I was able to explain why I was making the changes that I was making to the thing that they'd come up with. Like, it doesn't need that much color correction. We need to use, authentic English hops. And when it went out to the, because Spearhead sends beer to a lot of people on Instagram, and when it went out, there was like not a dry eye in the house. Everybody's just, I remember when beer tasted like this. Oh God.
Right.
And it was just delightful watching, because Thomas had retired, I guess. Jacob was in charge. Like, he's a very young brewer, but he had like all the technical part of it down. Like, he understood why we were doing the things we were doing, and some of that was communication beforehand. But I think he just has a knack for it. And you like to see people, especially like younger people who don't have historical context for stuff, kind of amalgamate it into their experience. Really take it on board.
Cool. I remember a story years ago now, from Mary Beth, and she was brewing a beer. So Ron was still like 5 days a week active brewing at the Grand at the time, and but she was doing a collab beer. It was like I can't even remember what the thing was. It was like a female brewed kind of thing, her and somebody else. And they had this idea. I think they were trying a Scotch ale, and she wanted to get some kettle caramelization going in the boil. And in doing that, she got a little gun shy. Something had happened, and they were worried about something. I can't even remember what the details of the story were, but she wasn't quite freaking out, but she was like, and she said, oh, and then my dad came in for work.
Yeah.
And I said, oh, can you check this? Because I'm worried about like X and Y. And he literally like dipped his finger in on it. Yep. Nope. That's fine. That'll work. And then was like, you might want to change this, but you're good to go. And it's like, at that point in her career, she didn't have that years of experience. And he did.
Yeah.
And literally he just finger in and went, nope. And like it's worked. You know, it's not finished beer, but just at this point in this process, and you're worried about these two things. Yeah, no, it's fine. It's good. Carry on, you know, and just having that, that level of experience allows you to do things where you can take an idea and actually shape it in your head and be like, oh, we'll do it like this. And like, I can already identify what the pitfalls might be and how we're going to get around that. You know, I still have a thing. I don't know why, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I haven't seen it. Somebody did it. I don't know why no one's done this. I want to make a Baltic Porter that's root beer. So
that's a tap line killer. That's gonna.
Oh yeah, you couldn't serve it on draft. It's got to be in bottle. You'd torch any draft line you put that through. But and small bottles like 330s, just a little guy. But all your regular, wintergreen and sarsaparilla or whatever, but in a Baltic Porter, because Baltic Porter's already hit into that cola range. And if you can crank up more of those kind of medicinal herbs, we're dancing.
Yeah, it's not bad. I like it.
Nah, nobody wants to make it.
Well, I can understand why.
Yeah. Time consuming and very expensive.
Yeah. I mean, plus at this point in history where people are like, we have a new low-cal 90 calorie IPA. I'm like, why don't you?
I've got an 8.5% lager if you're interested. And it's black. It's black as night.
It's like herbs.
Yeah. Also, one of those herbs is considered a carcinogen in California. So can't sell it there.
You drink Diet Coke, you're fine.
We consume way worse carcinogens. Hey, we should maybe shut this down. I got a dog to walk. It's almost 10:30.
That's fair enough. But let's speak generally just for a second. That iterative process that we've been talking about, that's fantastic. But not all the breweries that exist go through that. I mean, a lot of people, they just walk up to a kettle and they throw some hops in there and they expect you to pay a premium for it. And on a Monday night, I don't feel like doing that. On a Monday night, I feel like drinking Pabst.
PBR. A beer that, if the can is to be believed, has been made the same since, what was the year? 18. It's on here somewhere. There's so many words. 1844.
I want you to just understand one thing about this. The subtext. This is the original Pabst Blue Ribbon beer. Nature's choicest products provide its prized flavor. Only the finest of hops and grains are used. Selected America's Best in 1893.
1893, which, by the way, they'd been making it for 49 years at that point.
Yes. So they'd had some time to develop it iteratively.
I suspect there might have been some iteration.
Yeah.
Except the thing with beer is it's always iterative because you have to work with what you have.
Yeah.
This is that old yarn we always used to spin about, like, winemakers have good years and bad years. Brewers make the same beer every year, regardless of what the crop looked like. That's the brewing challenge. But that said, I feel like in 1893, I'm sure they were adapting for the crop yield that year or whatever, but also nobody had the capacity to have one from 1892 and then compare with any level of accuracy.
Well, not only that, but if you go to the website, legitimately, it will give you no additional information. Like the American website for it does not even give you the alcohol percentage.
That's actually funny. It's funny. We didn't really get into the PBR, and I'm not drinking it now. But one of the things I've always appreciated, I don't really get any corn in it. I think it's all malt. I think it's extract based, but I think it's an all malt beer, which is, for its price point, impressive.
Yeah. $2.35 for a tall can, $10.50 for a 6-pack at the LCBO.
That's what this is it. Hey, have you had the blue one, the higher proof one? It's like 5.9 or whatever.
There are only I'll go so far, but only so far.
I feel like that one's a little performative.
Well, it's the Lake Race of that genre,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you remember Labatt Ice you could get in Quebec and it was like 10.2%?
Yeah. I remember, I would come back from university on the train and I would stop in Montreal or I'd be on the way back to university, and I'd have a room on the train, and
Like a sleeper cabin.
sleeper cabin. Yeah,
Wow.
well, it's cheaper than flying. Plus, I quite like looking at different parts of New Brunswick. And you'd sit there thinking, well, I might need provisions for the train. And I looked at that, but I never bought one.
Yeah. I remember I got what was the dep in Montreal in sort of the early aughts that everybody talked about? It was like you go to Montreal and the only two things you have to do, Palooza. It was called Dep Palooza.
Yeah.
And I think I'm saying that right. And then you go to do sale. And that was it. That was literally all there was to do in Montreal at the time. If you asked a beer geek in 2003 or something like that. But I went to that dep. I think the statute of limitation has been exceeded. The owners of Castro's were like, buy, I think it was $1,000 worth of beer, put it in the trunk, whatever you want, and we'll sell it at the bar. We'll just peel the label, the price tag labels off of it. I went, all right. So we did that. That was fun. But I bought myself some stuff at the same time. And the box that they gave me to take the beer out in, I didn't even look at, right? My beer was in this, like, they'd cut the top off little box, put that in the car, loaded up $1,000 worth of, I can't even remember. There was due to sale in there. There was some other stuff, and loaded that all into the car. There was a Unibrew that you couldn't get in Ontario, and I don't know what, and then drove home. And when I got home, I took my box out and I looked and I was like, oh, it's a Labatt Ice box. That's odd. And then I looked and I was like, it says I think it was like 10.2%. 10.2%?
Yeah.
And it was like, I think there were 500 ml bottles was what the box said. I was like, what the hell are you doing with your life if you're drinking 500 ml bottles of 10.2% Labatt Ice? Actually, I know it's kind of sad. It's not a life I want to live. It's like, why do they make this?
Well, but by the same token, we still have Crest Super in the LCBO.
Somebody the other day brought up Four Loko. Where did Four Loko go?
Well, they banned it after the caffeine thing.
I've never even had a Four Loko. I feel like I missed something.
Well, you've had a Red Bull and vodka.
Oh, I've had better than that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've had some crazy Red Bull variety cocktails, but yeah. But no, Four Loko was different because it was like, I guess if you put enough vodka in, but that stuff was like 7% in a can or something like that. It was ridiculous.
Like I had friends in university who drank Rev.
Yeah, I think you can still get Rev.
Well, and the only people I ever see purchasing Rev are people who need both caffeine and alcohol at the same time. And they've got a place to be.
Yeah.
Usually under a bridge.
Rev is not nice stuff. I actually have a general rule of thumb. If it's in a twist top pet bottle, I don't want to prejudge everything, but I'm just saying that's a real red flag right out of the gate.
Now, I can imagine that nobody will ever get to this point in the recording, so me saying this is completely useless. But there is a mental game I play as I'm walking along the street in Toronto, which is trying to see how well a neighborhood is doing by analyzing the empties that are littered on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're in a lake or nice neighborhood, you're not doing so well. But sometimes there'll be like a Mad Tom or possibly a Canuck.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, it's gentrifying. That's fun. The other day, as I'm walking to the Grant Brewery, there was a can of Stag Chili.
I saw you posted this. Yeah.
I don't know what that meant. Is that better or worse than a Molson Cold Shot? I'm not.
But it was a very hot variety of Stag Chili.
I mean, so they've got some spice tolerance,
Yeah. So who knows? When I was in high school, I ate a lot of Stag Chili because, again, you heard my high school schedule. I would often come home and we had one of the electric, and I would open the Stag Chili and put it in the pot, and I would toast about 8 pieces of bread.
Yep.
Yeah, and then eat that. Haven't had a Stag Chili in a long time. But the key was, at that point already in my life, I wasn't eating meat, and Stag Chili had a non-meat based canned chili.
Yeah, totally.
So that's what I was on.
Yeah.
I remember years ago, we were living on Glen Manor. So Grace was a tiny baby or was maybe not even born yet. So about 12 years ago. Do you remember what was his name? He did like marketing at Amsterdam when they were on Bathurst. He had like very fashionable hair.
Blake Van Delft.
Exactly. Blake. I knew Blake lived in the area. Like we never saw each other or interacted, but I knew he lived in the area. And one morning, I was taking one of our old dogs, now long dead, for a walk on the beach. And there was a can of nut brown. And do you remember the CJM brown? I can't remember. It was basically like it was like it was actually a little bit like Devil's Pale. It was like a very dark pale ale. But it was in the glass bottle, and underneath one of the lifeguard towers was a can of nut brown and a bottle of the CJM brown or whatever it was called. And I took a photo of it and I posted it on Facebook, which was a thing, and literally tagged him in it and was like, "I didn't leave these here, and so I have to assume you did." And then he messaged me privately because he was embarrassed. He was like, "Oh, I was on a date and things are happening, and we went down to the beach and had a couple of drinks, and I just completely forgot we left those there." I'm like, "Dude, it's not a problem. I don't care. Like, people litter on the beach all the time." But I just love that I was like, at that time, 12 years ago, even in the beach, I'm like, there's only two people here, especially the bottle, the nut brown. Okay, but that bottle, you can only get it at the brewery, and there are only two people probably in this whole neighborhood who knows where that brewery is. And if it ain't mine, it's got to be his.
Yeah. It used to be a much smaller world.
Way smaller. Now, literally, I go to a customer, like, because I'm delivering the mail, I go up on a customer's porch to drop some mail, and they've got like a little box of empties, which is kind of fun. Like I actually get to critique them. I'm like, "Oh, what are you into?" "Oh, okay. Interesting. Wouldn't have thought that." But so often now I go up on a person's porch and I see Left Field and I see Godspeed, and I'm just like, there's nothing I can do to make delivering mail better, but I'm like, I make sure they're nice and squared up before I put them in the box. I just want everything to be neat and tidy. Like, you guys are doing good. Here's your mail.
But this is the thing, right? Like, craft beer eventually won. I mean, the market saturation continues to increase, albeit a little slowly. It's just that nobody thought this was what it was going to look like.
No, absolutely not. And I think the thing is, the idea of like chasing like market share is almost kind of crazy, because the reality, and like I remember saying this years and years and years ago to people, like I would be doing like educational tasting stuff, and I'd be like, there are a lot of people who just don't like this. Yep. And that's fine. Like, there are a lot of people who don't like watching tennis. Like Wimbledon was just on. I didn't watch Wimbledon. I don't care about watching tennis. It doesn't mean anything to me, right? Nobody's ever going to convert me to tennis. It's just not something I care about. And it's the same with beer. Like,
a lot of the English beer drinking people out there on Twitter are paying real serious attention to the Ashes at the moment. If Douglas Adams couldn't make me care, I don't think anybody else is going to.
As a sidebar, we do need to get going, but so I've got a group chat with a bunch of my coaches for the minis, and one of them is English, actually more than one of them, but the guy I'm thinking of, there's a couple of key chatters, and one of them is English, one of them is Australian, one of them is a Kiwi.
Oh, perfect.
And so there's been a lot of Ashes chatter, but I keep pointing out the Ashes is, without a doubt, the stupidest trophy you will ever see. It literally looks like a joke. Like, you see these grown men sweaty from the heat of competition, having finally gotten there and won the trophy, and they hold this thing up. And people listening, I would very much encourage you to Google image search the Ashes trophy. It's the size of an egg cup.
Yeah.
Like it's maybe 7 centimeters tall, maybe, but it looks like it should be a meter tall. Like it's the right shape to be a trophy. It literally, is this a trophy for ants? This is going to have to be at least 4 times big, but it's so small. And then it's even better because they'll try and group in, and it's like one guy physically dominates this trophy. You get an entire 11 cricket players trying to pose. Like, you can't get them all in, because if you do, the trophy is so small you can't see it. It's tiny.
You'd have to put it in the foreground and get them to stand 40 feet back.
Yeah, exactly. Put a little platform off the lens of the camera, so it's sitting here, and then everyone else is 10 meters behind it. Hey, we won the big one. Now, I get it. It contains the ashes of a bale from a cricket game that, I don't know, something blah, 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 colonization. But it's the dumbest trophy in the entire world, and they contest it with so much passion.
But it's also amazing because it's the most possibly colonial thing that could ever exist, because like they're literally fighting over the burned ashes of the past.
Yeah.
And the only, I guess, like aside from the small trophy, the only thing that you really get is the ability to lord it over some other member of the Commonwealth.
And I would have to confirm this. I don't know over the entire history of the Ashes, but certainly over the past, say, 20 years of the Ashes, it's always Australia. Australia always goes, ha ha, we beat you again, you stupid pommies. Yeah.
Well, you got to give them something to do.
Yeah, there's only so much resource extraction and political gamesmanship you can do. I can't tell you, for one, I can't tell you who the Prime Minister of Australia is right now. And even if I could, I probably couldn't tell you who it was 2 months ago, because, man, they go through a lot of prime ministers down there.
Well, I don't know about that, but like from a resource extraction standpoint, I do have one story. And I think we should probably finish after this one, because it's like, we got places to be.
I'm game.
I was, I lead walking tours for Toronto Urban Adventures, and more recently for a company called With Locals. And like one of the first 5 or 6 tours I had to do back in like 2017, we had people from Australia. Like, I'm looking up the country code on the phone number, figure out where people are from, so I know what to look for, right? And I get to the start point of the tour, and there's a guy in the middle of the street taking pictures of trucks that are driving by. I'm like, wow, I'm glad it's not that guy. And he walks over.
Yeah, it was that guy.
It's that guy. So he's a truck driver for a gold mining company in Perth on the West Coast.
Yeah.
And legitimately, like, he's a proper professional truck driver. One arm is all just sunburn and carcinoma.
Yeah. And the other one's fish belly white.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
And his name is Craig. And Craig, talks like a proper Western Australian. And I said, all right, we're going to make sure you have fun. Why are you in the middle of, because I drive trucks for a living, and these are old. And his wife's explaining it to me, like, she's got a very high-pitched voice. So, hey, you, when he's driving trucks back home, that kind of thing. When he's doing that, he's driving brand new trucks, because it's a gold mining company. They buy new ones every year.
Yeah.
Insurance purposes or whatever. So I'm trying to get him to drink something, at the first stop. He doesn't know any brands, and they're from Western Australia. It's my job to explain, well, you might like this thing. So I say to him, Craig, what's your favorite beer? Like, what do you drink in Australia? And he's 4X. And I'm like, that is a terrible answer. I'm not saying this out loud because Craig is, a guest, but it's 4X is for people who, can't spell beer. XXX. Mm-hmm. Castlemaine Gold. And I said to him, so that must be, that's like a brand loyalty thing. You must have chosen that when you were a very young man. That must be the reason you're drinking this beer. And he said, no, I'm drinking this beer because my wife wanted me to switch down from Jack Daniels. What? And she's like, yeah. So we're going to get him whatever he wants, And we get at the end of the second stop, we're at Betty's. He's got enough beer in him. We've got him on Mill Street Organic. He likes that. He likes one thing. He just wants to, drink yellow fizzy beer.
Older the better.
Yeah, exactly. Because reasons. So he's doing really well. He goes to the washroom. His wife, who thanks for taking Craig seriously. Last time he chose where we went on vacation. This is my shout this time around. Last time he broke his neck trying to do a backflip on a BMX motorcycle. I'm like, he broke his neck and his leg in 3 places. I'm like, no, I'm trying to convince myself that these Australian people are baying, and not in Western Australia. No, it's Mad Max out there for sure. And it's like I've been trying to disabuse myself of the notion and like give people a chance, so that you don't have to stereotype. But he comes out of the washroom. I want to show you something. And he's got his phone out, and he's got a video of his riding lawnmower. I think it's a Kawasaki, and he's tricked it out to go 50 kilometers an hour. He's doing burnout donuts on his lawnmower in the video at a rally where people specifically gathered to do that.
Yeah.
Like, they've all tricked out their lawnmowers. And it's just like, okay, it's cool. Stereotypes exist for a reason sometimes.
The Aussie in the group chat, the coach, is a guy called Malcolm.
Yeah.
He's in his 60s, I think. I think he's in his 60s. Came out because his neighbor's kid wanted to get into rugby, U10, under 10. He's like, oh, yeah. And he used to play for the Beach. He's back in the day. He said, oh, I'll come out. Yeah, I'll be all right. And came out, coached maybe 3 weeks. Then he texts me one day before training, goes, oh, sorry, I'm not going to be able to make it. I was about to do that with an Australian accent. The phone didn't have an Australian accent. And not going to be able to make it. I was mountain biking with some friends last night, and I fell and broke 2 vertebrae in my collarbone.
Yep.
I went, all right, Malcolm, man, I hope you get better. All right. He's been very active in the group chat. He's fine. He's got a weird RoboCop brace on. Yeah. Guys in his, and he goes, oh, I was lucky I had my friends with me. I would have died out there if it wasn't for them. Like, okay.
Some people just don't have risk avoidance as a feature.
It's just, they just go all until they don't. And then they're done.
Yeah, but what a way to go.
Not a bad way to go. Hey, speaking of going till you're done, this is Pabst Blue Ribbon, and you can buy it anywhere you buy beer. Anywhere you buy beer. This, incidentally, was juicing, slightly harder to get your hands on, but worth checking out. And special shout out, Two Loons. Get that too. If you like beer and you like delicious things, that's a beer that's delicious. Jordan, thank you for joining me. What a fun little literally what we just did was spent 2 hours catching up. And if anybody wants to listen in, you can figure out where we're both at.
Yeah, we didn't really swear very much either, so it's wholesome for the whole family.
It's true. Yeah, your kids can listen. As I teased, I'm going to be on Ben Johnson's podcast. I don't know when it comes out. Soon. So that'll be interesting. And next week, don't know what's happening. Jordan, you're not doing your podcast anymore. We didn't even talk about you, really, on that side.
No, I got so many different directions I'm being pulled in at the moment that it just doesn't, I quite like the downtime.
I don't think people appreciate, because it seems like not that big a deal, how actually time consuming and mentally exhausting it is, kind of week in, week out, just spending even 25 minutes, 30 minutes recording a thing and then putting it out. It's not easy.
Well, we did it for about 2.5 years. And the takeaway from it is that the things that you would assume are going to be newsworthy generally aren't. Like, there are a lot of breweries that open, they're very similar. They don't really have any experience yet. So it's just like, this happened. Great. And the things that are important are, so weighty typically to such a large number of people that you don't want to step on them too hard. You know what I mean? Like, anytime a brewery closes down, you have to feel for the people, because especially if you went around the province and you wrote books, you kind of know them and you're kind of rooting for them. So it's always hard to watch that shit.
Yeah, that's not easy. And that's between closures and buyouts. It's been happening a lot recently, but
More coming.
There are absolutely more coming. Incidentally, if you want to start yourself a brewery and need a real fire sale deal on some equipment, Keep an eye on Kijiji. That's what we got tonight. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and remind everybody that this song is Blink Ray Gun from Rob Currie and the Currie Brothers. And as soon as, no, I don't want to end this. What I want to do, I have to stop this in two places. Hey, Jordan, thanks for hanging out. I think I got my buttons down. You have yourself a good night, but don't go anywhere.
Okay.
No, I lied. I don't know how to stop this at all.
I'm gonna
nope.
mute myself and head to the washroom because I drank beer.
Do that. Hopefully I'll have stopped this by the time we're done. Oh, there we go. Yes.